In the ancient city of Veritas, where cobblestones gleamed like polished gems and spires reached toward the heavens, there existed a division more profound than any wall could create. This was a city built on silk, sustained by thread, and torn apart by pride. Two families controlled the lifeblood of Veritas, the silk trade that had made the city famous across continents. The House of Argent, whose banner bore a silver moth against an azure field, commanded the northern quarter. Their workshops produced fabrics that captured moonlight itself, cool satins that rippled like water, brocades so intricate they seemed woven from dreams. When nobility sought elegance, they sought Argent silk. The House of Aureus held dominion over the southern quarter, their crimson banners emblazoned with a golden spider. Their looms sang a different song, creating velvets so rich they absorbed light, taffetas that shimmered with captured sunshine, fabrics that promised warmth and passion and fire. When royalty desired magnificence, they commissioned Aureus silk. Between these two houses stretched a chasm wider than the merchant quarter that separated their estates. No one remembered precisely when the feud began. Some whispered of a betrayal in the founding days of Veritas, others spoke of a stolen design, a broken betrothal, a business deal corrupted by greed. The truth had been buried beneath generations of accumulated grievances, each slight building upon the last until the original wound was lost to time. What remained was hatred, pure and crystalline as mountain ice. An Argent would sooner touch fire than wear Aureus velvet. An Aureus would rather go naked than don Argent satin. Their children learned contempt before they learned letters. Their servants feuded in the markets. Their weavers competed with a viciousness that sometimes turned violent. The merchants of Veritas had grown wealthy on this rivalry, for each house constantly strove to outdo the other, creating fabrics of increasing beauty and complexity. But the city itself had grown sick with the poison of perpetual conflict. Joy was rationed. Trust was a luxury no one could afford. And love between the houses was not merely forbidden, it was unthinkable. Until the year when spring came early, when the roses bloomed in colors never seen before, when the stars seemed to burn brighter in the velvet night. That was the year everything changed. That was the year two young hearts decided that some things matter more than family, more than pride, more than life itself. This is their story. Elara of House Argent stood before the floor-length mirror in her chambers, her reflection a stranger draped in silk. The gown she wore was a masterwork of her family's craft, layers of silver satin that caught the candlelight with every breath, embroidered with seed pearls that traced patterns of moths in flight. It was beautiful. It was suffocating. You look every inch a daughter of Argent, her mother said, adjusting the diamond comb in Elara's dark hair. Tonight's masquerade will be spoken of for years. Half the nobility of the realm has accepted our invitation. Elara forced a smile, though her chest felt tight. 20 years old, and she had attended 100 such celebrations, glittering affairs filled with masked faces, false laughter, and carefully calculated social maneuvering. The Argent Manor would overflow with guests tonight, all of them evaluating, comparing, judging. Lord Marcellus will be in attendance, her mother continued, her tone carefully neutral. His estate in the eastern provinces is quite substantial. Ah. So that was the true purpose of tonight's spectacle. Elara's jaw tightened. Lord Marcellus was 40 if he was a day, twice widowed, with a reputation for cruelty to his servants. But he was wealthy, titled, and politically useful to House Argent. I see, Elara said quietly. Her mother's hand rested briefly on her shoulder. You are our daughter, our jewel. Your father and I only want what's best for you for our house. The Aureus grow bolder each season. We need strong alliances. After her mother departed, Elara remained before the mirror, studying the young woman reflected there. Dark eyes that had once sparkled with curiosity now held shadows. Lips that once smiled freely now curved with practiced politeness. When had she become this creature of obligation? When had the bright spirit she'd possessed as a child been polished away, replaced with this smooth, acceptable surface? She thought of her childhood, of running through the Argent workshops while weavers called good-natured greetings. She remembered the magic she'd felt watching thread transform into beauty, the satisfaction of learning her first stitches, the pride of creating something lovely with her own hands. But as she'd grown, her education had shifted. No longer was she meant to create, she was meant to represent. To embody Argent perfection. To be a living advertisement for her family's superiority. The music began drifting up from the ballrooms below, strings and flutes weaving melodies as intricate as any silk. Elara descended the grand staircase, her mask in place. It was silver naturally, adorned with tiny diamonds that matched her gown. Behind it, she could hide. Behind it, she could pretend. The ballroom blazed with light from 1,000 candles. Guests swirled across the marble floors in a rainbow of silks, though she noted with grim satisfaction that most wore Argent fabrics. Her father's doing, he'd likely offered generous gifts to ensure the family's dominance would be on full display. Lord Marcellus materialized at her side within minutes, his mask doing little to conceal his florid complexion and calculating eyes. He smelled of wine and entitlement. "Lady Elara," he said, bowing with practiced charm. "You are radiant this evening. Might I claim a dance?" She murmured her acceptance because refusing would cause a scene, would disappoint her parents, would violate a dozen unspoken rules of social conduct. His hand clasped hers, too tight, too possessive, and he swept her onto the floor. He spoke of his estates, his investments, his plans for expansion. He spoke of her beauty as if it were another asset to acquire. He never once asked about her thoughts, her desires, her dreams. She was a prize to be won, a merger to be negotiated. When the dance finally ended, Elara felt desperate for air. The ballroom pressed in on her, too many bodies, too much heat, too much falseness dressed up as celebration. She made polite excuses and slipped away, moving through the less crowded galleries until she reached the eastern doors. The gardens welcomed her with cool darkness and the scent of jasmine. She removed her mask, letting the night air touch her face. Above, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Out here, she could breathe. Out here, she could be herself, whoever that was. She followed the garden path to the fountain at its heart, an old thing, built centuries ago, moss-covered and beautiful in its decay. Water whispered over stone in an endless conversation with itself. Elara sat on the fountain's edge, trailing her fingers through the cool water, and allowed herself to simply exist, unmarried, unpromised, unclaimed. "Do you often flee from music, my lady?" The voice startled her so completely that she nearly fell into the fountain. She spun to find a young man emerging from the shadows of an arbor. He wore evening clothes of obvious quality, though she couldn't immediately place the style. His mask was subtle, black silk adorned with delicate golden filigree that caught the moonlight. He was young, perhaps her own age or slightly older. Dark hair fell carelessly across his forehead. His posture suggested confidence without arrogance. And his eyes, visible through the mask, held a warmth that Lord Marcellus's had entirely lacked. Elara faltered, her composure shaken. "I needed air." "Forgive me," he said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I didn't mean to intrude. I escaped the festivities myself. All that posturing grows tiresome." Despite herself, Elara smiled. "You speak treason, sir. These celebrations are meant to be the pinnacle of society." "Are they?" He moved closer, not threateningly, but with genuine curiosity. "Or are they elaborate cages where we're all meant to perform our assigned roles?" The observation struck something deep in Elara's chest. "You see it too," she said softly. "I see many things I'm not supposed to notice." He gestured to the fountain. "May I sit?" She nodded, suddenly not wanting to be alone. He settled on the opposite side of the fountain, maintaining a respectful distance. For a long moment, they simply existed in companionable silence, the fountain singing its ancient song between them. "The stars are honest at least," he said finally, gazing upward. "They don't pretend to be anything other than what they are. Burning light across impossible distances. No masks required." "You speak like a poet," Elara observed. "I speak like someone who's tired of lying," he replied. "Do you know what it's like to live your entire life as a symbol? To have every action weighed, every word measured, every friendship calculated for advantage?" "Yes," Elara breathed. "Yes, I know exactly what that's like." They talked then, truly talked, in a way Elara hadn't experienced in years. He spoke of feeling trapped by expectations, of loving his family while resenting their demands. She confessed her fear of becoming nothing more than an ornament, a valuable piece in someone else's game. They discussed philosophy and art, dreams and disappointments. He made her laugh with wry observations about society's absurdities. She surprised herself with her own wit, rediscovering a part of herself she'd thought lost. The stranger, and she realized she still didn't know his name, spoke with passion about beauty not as something to possess but as something to create and share. "My family makes beautiful things," he said. "But what good is beauty if it's only for the wealthy? If it's only used to demonstrate superiority?" "A dangerous philosophy," Elara said. "Beauty has always belonged to those who can afford it." "Does it? Or have we just convinced ourselves of that?" He leaned forward, animated. "What if beauty could belong to everyone? What if creation was valued over competition?" "You'd overthrow the entire social order," Elara said, but there was no mockery in her voice. "Perhaps it deserves overthrowing," he replied. The clock tower began its midnight chime, each bell stroke a reminder that this moment was temporary, that the real world awaited beyond this garden sanctuary. Elara stood reluctantly. "I should return," she said. "I'll be missed." He rose as well, and for the first time, she saw hesitation in his manner. "Will you think me terribly forward if I ask to see you again?" Every rational thought screamed that this was dangerous, impossible, foolish. She didn't know who he was, what family he represented. For all she knew, he could be an Aureus, and that thought should have horrified her. But instead, something fierce and bright kindled in her chest. "There's a temple," she said quickly, before courage could fail her. "Northeast of here, in the old quarter. It's abandoned, fallen to ruin. Do you know it?" "I can find it," he said. "Tomorrow. At sunset." "Tomorrow," he agreed. They stood there, neither wanting to leave, both knowing they must. Finally, Elara replaced her mask and turned back toward the manor. At the garden door, she looked back once. He remained by the fountain, moonlight silvering his shoulders, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his house. But somehow, in one stolen hour beside an ancient fountain, he'd awakened something in her that had been sleeping, a hope that life could be more than duty, that she could be more than what others expected. It was dangerous. It was reckless. It was the most alive she'd felt in years. Kaelen of House Aureus returned to the ballroom in turmoil. The celebration continued around him, Argent and their allies dancing, drinking, displaying their wealth with typical ostentation. He should have felt anger at being here, at having to pretend civility toward his family's greatest rivals. Instead, he felt only the lingering warmth of the girl by the fountain. She hadn't told him her name either. Perhaps that was for the best. Names carried weight in Veritas, revealed allegiances, drew battle lines. Without names, they'd simply been two souls sharing honest conversation. "Where have you been?" His father appeared at his elbow, resplendent in crimson and gold. Lord Aureus's mask did nothing to soften the hardness in his eyes. "Lord Sebastian wishes to discuss our joint venture in the southern ports. You should be networking, not wandering." "Apologies, father," Kaelen said automatically. "The Argent grow more arrogant by the day," his father continued, voice low with disgust. "Look at this display, designed to humiliate us, to showcase their supposed superiority. But we'll show them. Our new collection will make their satins look like peasant rags." Kaelen made appropriate noises of agreement while his mind remained in the garden. The girl's eyes had been dark and deep, filled with an intelligence most people worked to conceal. Her laugh had been genuine, unpracticed. When she'd spoken of feeling trapped, he'd heard echoes of his own frustration. He'd been raised to hate the Argent, just as they'd been raised to hate the Aureus. The feud was mother's milk to children of both houses. He'd absorbed the lessons. Argent weavers were cold and calculating, their fabrics flashy but lacking soul. House Argent valued profit over artistry, appearances over substance. They were the enemy, responsible for every misfortune that befell House Aureus. But lately, Kaelen had begun questioning the narratives he'd been fed. The hatred seemed hollow, based on ancient grievances that no one could properly explain. When he'd suggested to his father that perhaps reconciliation might benefit both houses, Lord Aureus had erupted in fury. "You know nothing of what they've done to us," he'd raged. "The Argent are vipers. Never forget that." Yet the girl in the garden hadn't seemed like a viper. She'd seemed lonely, thoughtful, trapped as he was in a life determined by others. The evening dragged on interminably. Kaelen fulfilled his obligations, conversed with the right people, danced with suitable partners. All the while, his thoughts circled back to tomorrow's sunset, to an abandoned temple, to the possibility of seeing her again. When he finally returned to the Aureus estate in the small hours of morning, he found his younger sister Lyra waiting in the library, a book forgotten in her lap. "How was the enemy's den?" she asked with a wry smile. Kaelen sank into a chair across from her. "Lyra, do you ever wonder if the feud is pointless?" His sister's eyebrows rose. "That's heresy, brother. I'm serious. No one can even explain why we hate them. Something about a betrayal generations ago, but the details change depending on who's telling the story. Meanwhile, we waste energy and resources competing when we could." Kaelen. Lyra leaned forward, her expression concerned. "You can't think like that. Not allowed, certainly not where father might hear. The feud is all we've known. It defines us. Does it have to? What brought this on?" He wanted to tell her about the girl, but some instinct held him back. Instead he said, "I'm just tired of hatred. Tired of being told who to despise without reason." Lyra studied him for a long moment. "Be careful, brother. Hearts that question family loyalty tend to find trouble." She was right, of course. But as Kaelen climbed the stairs to his chambers, as he stood at his window watching the sky pale toward dawn, he couldn't bring himself to regret tomorrow's meeting. Perhaps his heart was leading him toward trouble. Perhaps that was exactly where he needed to go. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Elara endured breakfast with her parents, suffered through her mother's pointed comments about Lord Marcellus's attentiveness, and avoided questions about why she disappeared during the ball. She claimed a headache, exhaustion, anything to escape to her chambers where she could watch the sun's progress across the sky and count the hours until sunset. Her old nurse, Dame Marjorie, found her pacing. "Restless child?" the old woman asked, settling into a chair with her mending. Elara had been raised as much by Dame Marjorie as by her parents. The nurse knew her moods, could read her silences. Lying would be pointless. "I met someone last night," Elara admitted. "Someone interesting." Dame Marjorie's needle paused. "Interesting how?" "We talked." Really talked, not the meaningless pleasantries of society. "It was..." Elara struggled for words. It was like breathing after drowning. "This someone have a name?" "We didn't exchange names." The needle resumed its steady rhythm. "Probably wise, considering." "Considering what?" "Considering you're radiating enough joy and terror to light the city," Dame Marjorie said dryly. "Which suggests this mystery person is someone you shouldn't be meeting." Elara sat beside her nurse, desperate to share the confusion in her heart. What if everything we've been taught about duty and family and loyalty is wrong? What if there's another way to live? Dangerous questions, my girl. But are they wrong questions? Dame Marjorie set down her mending and took Elara's hands in her gnarled ones. "I've watched you grow from a spirited child into this careful, measured young woman. I've seen the light dim in your eyes year by year as you learn to shrink yourself to fit their expectations. If this mystery person has rekindled your spirit, then perhaps they're worth the risk." Even if, Elara stopped, afraid to voice the possibility. "Even if they're from the wrong family?" Dame Marjorie finished. "Love doesn't consult our feuds, child. It goes where it will." "I don't love him," Elara protested. "I barely know him." "Not yet," Dame Marjorie agreed. "But you're considering the possibility, which is just as dangerous." She squeezed Elara's hands. "Be careful. But also, be brave. A life lived in fear is no life at all." As the sun began its descent, Elara changed into simpler clothes, a traveling cloak over her gown. She told the household she was visiting the city shrine to pray, a common enough activity that no one questioned it. Dame Marjorie provided a basket as camouflage and a knowing look that needed no words. The old quarter of Veritas had seen better centuries. Here, the buildings leaned together like tired old men, their plaster cracked and faded. The cobblestones were uneven, the streets narrow and winding. Few people of quality ventured here, which made it perfect for a clandestine meeting. The temple dedicated to gods no one worshipped anymore sat surrounded by overgrown gardens. Vines had claimed the columns, and the roof had partially collapsed, but there remained a haunting beauty in its decay. In the fading light, it seemed caught between worlds, neither fully of the present nor entirely lost to the past. Elara entered through the broken gates, her heart hammering. What if he didn't come? What if last night's connection had been merely the product of moonlight and wine? What if he was already there, standing before the altar where a stone goddess gazed serenely at nothing? He'd removed his mask, and in the golden sunset light, Elara saw his face fully for the first time. He was handsome, yes, but more than that, his features held a combination of strength and gentleness that made her breath catch. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and his face transformed with relief and joy. "You came. I was beginning to fear I'd imagined last night." "I nearly convinced myself the same," Elara admitted. They stood apart, suddenly awkward without the fountain between them, without masks to hide behind. In full light, without the safety of anonymity, the stakes felt higher. "I'm Kaelen," he said finally. "I should have told you last night, but—" "Names complicate things," Elara finished. "I'm Elara. Elara." He spoke her name like a prayer, and something in her chest loosened. "Thank you for trusting me enough to meet again." "I'm not sure trust is the word," she said honestly. "This is probably foolish." "Probably," he agreed. "But some things are worth foolishness." They began to walk through the ruined temple, exploring its forgotten spaces. Kaelen told her about his childhood, about learning the silk trade from master weavers, about the pride and pressure of being his family's heir. Elara shared her own story, the suffocation of expectations, the loss of her own desires beneath the weight of family duty. "Do you ever wonder what your life would be like if you could choose?" Kaelen asked. "If you weren't bound by birth and name?" "Every day," Elara confessed. "I imagine traveling beyond Veritas, seeing places where no one knows my family. Creating something with my own hands, not for profit or prestige, but simply for the joy of creation." "What would you create?" She thought for a moment. Tapestries telling stories. Not historical or heroic tales, but simple, honest moments. A mother teaching her daughter to sew. Friends sharing laughter. Sunlight through autumn leaves. The small beauties that get overlooked. Kaelen's expression softened. "That sounds wonderful." "A foolish dream," Elara said, trying to sound dismissive. "Why foolish? Why do our dreams have to be practical or profitable? Why can't they simply be ours?" They found themselves in what had once been the temple's inner sanctuary. The roof here remained mostly intact, creating a space both sheltered and open to the sky through gaps in the stonework. Scattered shafts of dying sunlight painted stripes across the floor. "I need to tell you something," Kaelen said abruptly. "Something that might change everything." Elara's stomach tightened. "Go on." "My family name is Aureus." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Elara should have reacted with horror, outrage, immediate rejection. She'd been taught since birth that the Aureus were corrupt, greedy, responsible for every misfortune that befell her house. The feud was absolute. Association with an Aureus was betrayal of the worst kind. But looking at Kaelen, at the anxiety in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders as he waited for her response, she felt no hatred. Only a deep, weary sadness at the absurdity of it all. "I'm Argent," she said quietly. He closed his eyes briefly, and she couldn't tell if his expression held relief or resignation. "I suspected." The timing, the location. And perhaps I hoped in a twisted way. Because if you were anyone else, if this could be simple, it would mean less? Elara finished. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I'm a fool looking for meaning in impossibility." They should have parted then. Should have recognized the barrier between them and walked away before anyone got hurt. But neither moved. Instead, they stood in the ruined sanctuary, two young people bearing the weight of their family's hatred, unable to walk away from the connection they'd found. "My father would disown me if he knew I was here," Elara said. "Mine would do worse than that," Kaelen replied. "This is madness." "Yes. We should leave. Forget we met. Return to our separate lives and never speak of this again." "Yes," Kaelen agreed. "We should." Neither moved. Outside, the sun surrendered to the horizon, and shadows claimed the temple. In the growing darkness, the distance between them felt both vast and negligible. "What if," Elara began, then stopped, afraid to voice the thought. "What if we refuse to let them win?" Kaelen finished. What if we claim something for ourselves, despite everything? You're talking about rebellion against everything we've known. I'm talking about refusing to inherit hatred I didn't create. I'm talking about the possibility of something real in a world of performance and pretense. Elara thought of Lord Marcellus, of a future as his wife, bearing his children, hosting his parties, slowly disappearing until nothing remained but the shell of duty. She thought of a lifetime of careful words and calculated actions, of playing her assigned role until death released her. Then she thought of this moment, this connection, this startling sense of being truly seen and understood. How would this even work? She asked, and in asking, crossed a threshold. Kaelen's face lit with cautious hope. We could meet here. Carefully. Secretly. Just to talk, to know each other. To have one place in our lives that's honest. And if we're discovered? Then we'll face whatever comes together. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It violated everything they'd been taught about loyalty and family. But Elara thought of Dame Marjorie's words, a life lived in fear is no life at all. The temple becomes our sanctuary, she said. Our place outside the feud, outside the expectations. Whatever else the world demands of us, here we can be simply ourselves. Simply ourselves, Kaelen echoed, and took her hand. His touch sent warmth through her. Not the painful heat of fire, but the gentle warmth of sunlight after cold. His hand was calloused from working the looms, strong but careful. Thank you, he said softly. For not walking away. For taking this chance. Don't thank me yet, Elara replied, though she smiled. We might both regret this terribly. I doubt that, Kaelen said, and squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. When can you return? They arranged their second meeting, agreeing on signals and precautions, paths to take and times to arrive separately. It felt like planning a heist, which in a way it was. They were stealing moments from lives that belonged to their families. Walking home through darkening streets, Elara felt exhilaration and terror in equal measure. She'd crossed a line tonight, betrayed everything her parents believed in. She should feel guilty. Instead, she felt gloriously, terrifyingly alive. Spring deepened into summer, and the clandestine meetings continued. 3 times each week, Elara and Kaelen met at the ruined temple, their sanctuary from a world determined to keep them apart. With each meeting, the connection between them strengthened, threads weaving into a tapestry neither had anticipated. They shared their worlds with each other. Kaelen brought samples of his work, swatches of velvet he'd helped create, the colors rich and deep as wine. Elara brought sketches of designs she dreamed of weaving, patterns that broke from Argent tradition. They critiqued and praised each other's work with the honesty only possible between equals who truly understood the craft. But it was more than shared passion for weaving that bound them. It was the relief of being fully themselves, unguarded and honest. With Kaelen, Elara didn't have to measure her words or calculate her expressions. She could laugh too loudly, argue too passionately, admit doubts and fears without judgment. He met her intensity with his own, challenged her thinking, celebrated her insights. She learned that Kaelen wrote poetry in stolen moments, verses about light and shadow, creation and destruction. He'd never shared them with anyone, certain his family would mock such impracticality. But he read them to Elara in the temple's hush, his voice tentative at first, then growing confident as he saw her genuine appreciation. Kaelen learned that Elara possessed a wicked sense of humor beneath her composed exterior. She mimicked the pretentious nobles who frequented her parents' gatherings with savage accuracy, making him laugh until tears streamed down his face. She was brilliant and fierce and funny, nothing like the cold, calculating Argent his father's stories had prepared him for. You're not what I expected, Kaelen admitted one evening as they sat side by side on a fallen column, watching fireflies dance in the overgrown garden. What did you expect? Elara asked. Someone, lesser. Shallow. Cruel, perhaps. The Argent in my father's stories are monsters wearing silk. The Aureus in my father's stories are the same, Elara said quietly. Greedy. Dishonorable. Willing to do anything for profit. We've been lied to our entire lives, Kaelen said, anger threading his voice. Fed hatred with our breakfast, taught contempt with our lessons. For what? Pride? Ancient grudges no one even remembers. Control, Elara suggested. If they can make us hate the same enemies, we won't question their authority. We'll dedicate our lives to the feud instead of examining whether it makes any sense." They sat in silence, contemplating the weight of that realization. Around them, the temple grounds hummed with summer night sounds, crickets and frogs, the rustle of wind through leaves, the distant sounds of the city. "I call you Moonbeam," Kaelen said suddenly. "In my thoughts. You light up my world of enforced pride and performance. You help me see clearly when everything else is shadows and lies." Elara's throat tightened with emotion. "I think of you as Sunstride. You bring warmth to my cold, careful existence. You make me feel brave enough to imagine a different life." "Moonbeam and Sunstride," Kaelen said softly. "Light finding light across darkness." He reached for her hand, and she gave it willingly. They'd been careful about touch, aware of the dangerous territory they navigated. But this felt right, their fingers interlacing, palms pressed together, a physical acknowledgement of the bond growing between them. "I'm falling in love with you," Kaelen said, the words tumbling out as if they'd been dammed up too long. "I know it's foolish and impossible, I know there's no future for us, but I can't help it. You've become essential to me, like air and light and water. I think of you constantly. I count hours until I can see you again. You haunt my dreams and wake me with hope. I love you, Elara. I love you absolutely." Elara's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of overwhelming relief. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been terrified to admit it, even to myself. But I do. I love you with everything I am." They embraced then, clinging to each other in the gathering darkness. The world outside might be cruel and rigid, but here in this moment, they had each other. It was enough. It had to be enough. Their love couldn't remain entirely secret, not from the people who knew them best. Dame Marjorie had suspected from the beginning, but when she saw the change in Elara, the new light in her eyes, the renewed energy, she knew for certain. "You're seeing him again," she said one morning, not quite a question. "Yes," Elara admitted. There was no point in lying. Dame Marjorie sighed deeply. "Is he worthy of you?" "He is. He's kind and thoughtful, and he sees me, truly sees me, not just as an Argent daughter but as myself." "And his family?" Elara hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Aureus." The old nurse's face went through a series of expressions: shock, worry, resignation. "Oh child. You've really done it now. I know it's impossible. I know my parents would be horrified. But Dame Marjorie, I can't walk away from him. I've tried. Every time we part, I tell myself it's the last time. But then I see him again and remember what happiness feels like, remember that I'm more than just a playing piece in their endless game." Dame Marjorie was quiet for a long time, her weathered hands folding and refolding a handkerchief. Finally, she spoke. "I've served your family for 40 years. I watched your father grow from boy to man, helped raise you from infancy. I've dedicated my life to House Argent." Elara's heart sank, certain she was about to lose her nurse's support. "But," Dame Marjorie continued, "I've also watched this feud poison everything good in Veritas. I've seen promising young people twisted by hatred they inherited, not earned. I've watched your father grow harder each year, your mother more calculating. I don't want that fate for you." "You'll keep my secret?" "I'll do more than that. I'll help you however I can. Love is too precious to sacrifice on the altar of pride." She reached out and cupped Elara's face. "But you must be so careful, child. If your parents discover this, they won't respond with understanding. They'll see it as the ultimate betrayal." Kaelen found an unexpected ally as well, though from a different source. Brother Theron, a friar who served at the city's main church, had been Kaelen's tutor years ago. They'd maintained a correspondence, the older man offering philosophical guidance when the pressures of family grew too heavy. During one particularly difficult week, when his father had been especially harsh about Aureus' superiority and Argent treachery, Kaelen sought out Brother Theron at the church. They walked in the cloistered gardens, away from listening ears. Kaelen found himself confessing everything: the chance meeting, the growing love, the impossible situation. Brother Theron listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. When Kaelen finished, the friar remained silent for several minutes, considering. "You know what I'm going to say," Brother Theron finally spoke. "That I'm a fool. That this can only end in disaster. That I should honor my family. Actually, the friar said with a slight smile, I was going to say that love is the highest virtue, and that feuds are human folly masquerading as righteousness. Kaelen stopped walking, stunned. The rivalry between Aureus and Argent has consumed this city for generations, Brother Theron continued. It's devoured happiness, prosperity, even lives. Every year I pray for reconciliation, for some force strong enough to break the cycle of hatred. Perhaps you and this young woman are the answer to those prayers. Or perhaps we're just two fools defying our families for selfish reasons, Kaelen said bitterly. Is love selfish? Or is it the most generous thing we can offer another soul? True seeing, true acceptance, true partnership. My father would say I'm betraying everything the Aureus stand for. Your father has lived his whole life in service to hatred, Brother Theron said gently. That's a tragedy, not a model to emulate. You have a chance to choose differently. But how? There's no future for us. Even if our families didn't despise each other, my father has plans for me, alliances to forge, business to expand. Elara faces similar pressures. We can't just be together. Brother Theron stopped beneath an ancient olive tree, its branches twisted with age. You're correct that the path won't be easy. But consider this, what if your love could be the bridge that finally heals the city's oldest wound? What if the union of Aureus and Argent could demonstrate that cooperation is stronger than competition, that love is more powerful than hate? You make it sound noble. It feels desperate and doomed. Most noble things do, the friar said with a sad smile. The question isn't whether the path is difficult, it's whether you have the courage to walk it. And whether the love you share is strong enough to weather the storms ahead. Kaelen thought of Elara, her quick mind, her hidden laughter, the way she looked at him as if he were the only real thing in a false world. It's strong enough, he said quietly. I would do anything for her. Then perhaps there's hope yet. And know this, my son, if you need sanctuary, if you need someone to speak for your love when the world condemns it, I will stand with you. The promise was unexpected and deeply moving. Kaelen clasped the friar's hand. Thank you. Truly. Don't thank me yet, Brother Theron said. The road ahead will test you both in ways you cannot imagine. But I believe love that can bridge such hatred is worth fighting for. As summer reached its zenith, the pressure on both Elara and Kaelen intensified. Lord Marcellus had made his intentions clear. He wanted Elara as his wife and was prepared to offer House Argent substantial political advantages in exchange. Elara's parents saw the match as ideal, combining wealth, influence, and strategic positioning. The betrothal will be announced at the Harvest Festival, her mother informed her over breakfast. 3 months to prepare the wedding. Isn't it exciting? Elara's hand trembled, nearly spilling her tea. Mother, I haven't agreed to marry Lord Marcellus. Her mother's expression hardened. Your agreement isn't required, dear. You're 20 years old. It's past time you fulfilled your duty to this family. Lord Marcellus is an excellent match. He's twice my age and cruel to his servants. He's wealthy and connected. Those are the qualities that matter. Love is a luxury we cannot afford, not with the Aureus growing more aggressive each season. We need strong alliances. After her mother left, Elara sat alone, the world crumbling around her. 3 months. She had 3 months before her life became a prison with no escape. She met Kaelen at the temple that evening, and the moment he saw her face, he knew something was catastrophically wrong. What's happened? He asked, gathering her into his arms. Through tears, she told him about the betrothal, the timeline, her parents' inflexibility. I tried to refuse. I tried to tell them I needed more time. They won't listen. In their eyes, I'm not a person with desires, I'm a resource to be deployed for maximum advantage. Kaelen held her, his own heart breaking. We'll find a way. There has to be a solution. What solution? I can't refuse without cause, they'll simply override my objections. If I try to run, they'll find me. The Argent reach extends throughout the realm. I'm trapped. They sat together on the temple steps, Elara's tears soaking into Kaelen's shirt, both grappling with the reality of their situation. The love they'd nurtured in secret moments was about to be crushed by the weight of duty and expectation. Marry me, Kaelen said suddenly. Elara pulled back to look at him. What? Marry me. If you're already wed, they can't force you into betrothal with Marcellus. We'll go to Brother Theron, he'll perform the ceremony in secret. Kaelen, that's insane. Even if we married, our families would never accept it. They'd find ways to annul it, or worse. Then we leave Veritas. We run as far as we can, start new lives where no one knows our families. And abandon everything? Our homes, our work, everyone we love. You said it yourself, you're trapped here. At least if we run, we're trapped together. Elara wanted to say yes. Every fiber of her being screamed to accept, to choose love over duty, to escape the gilded cage of her birth. But reality intruded. Your family would pursue us. So would mine. We'd spend our lives looking over our shoulders, never safe, never settled. And what about the people who've helped us? Dame Marjorie would face questions. Brother Theron would be suspected. We'd bring ruin to everyone who showed us kindness. Kaelen knew she was right, but desperation made him stubborn. So what's your alternative? You marry Marcellus and we never see each other again? I'm supposed to watch you become his wife, bear his children, and pretend none of this happened. I don't know. Elara's voice broke. I don't know what to do. I only know that every path leads to pain. They held each other in the gathering darkness, two young people caught between impossible choices. The summer air felt heavy, oppressive, as if the sky itself pressed down on them. I can't lose you, Kaelen whispered. You're the only true thing in my life. Everything else is performance and pretense. Without you, I'm just going through the motions of existence. You won't lose me, Elara promised, though she didn't know how she could keep that promise. Whatever happens, what we have is real. They can't take that away. But even as she spoke the words, she wondered if they were true. Could love survive separation? Could memory sustain what presence had created? Or would time and distance erode even the strongest connection? Let me talk to Brother Theron, Kaelen said. Perhaps he can think of something we've missed. He's wise and he's sympathetic to our situation. Maybe there's a solution we can't see because we're too close to the problem. Elara nodded, grasping at any hope, however slim. And I'll talk to Dame Marjorie. She might know of precedents, ways that other young women have escaped unwanted marriages. They parted reluctantly that night, both aware that their time was running out like sand through an hourglass. The freedom they'd claimed in secret meetings was about to end. The question was whether they'd end with it, or whether their love could somehow survive the coming storm. Brother Theron listened to their plight with growing concern. He'd hoped their love might heal the feud through gradual revelation, careful diplomacy, the slow work of changing hearts. But events were moving too quickly, forcing decisions before groundwork could be laid. There is a way, he said finally, his voice heavy with reluctance. But it's dangerous, and if it fails, the consequences would be severe. Tell us, Kaelen urged. The friar hesitated, then continued. I have in my possession a tincture, a sleeping draught used in ancient times for healing purposes. It creates a sleep so deep that the person appears dead, no detectable breath, cold to the touch, completely still. The effect lasts precisely 2 days before the person naturally awakens. I don't understand, Elara said. If you were thought to be dead, the betrothal would be impossible. You'd be laid in your family crypt. I could send word to Kaelen in secret, telling him where and when you'd awaken. He could be there when you wake, and you could leave Veritas together. The plan was audacious, terrifying, and just plausible enough to consider. Elara's mind raced through the implications. My parents would grieve, she said slowly. Everyone would believe I'd died. Yes, Brother Theron acknowledged. That's the cruelty of this plan. But consider the alternative, a lifetime married to a man you don't love, forever separated from the person who completes you. Sometimes we must cause temporary pain to prevent permanent suffering. What are the risks? Kaelen asked. The draft itself is safe. I've used it before for patients who needed deep healing sleep. But the timing must be precise. You'd need to take it at the right moment, be discovered quickly enough that you're taken to the crypt before burial preparations alter your body. And Kaelen, you'd need to be waiting at the right time. If something delays you, if Elara wakes alone in the crypt. The horror of that scenario silenced them all. There's another risk, Brother Theron continued. If either family suspects foul play, they might investigate too thoroughly. If they discover you're not truly dead before you wake, the plan fails and everyone involved faces severe consequences. It's madness, Elara whispered. Yes, the friar agreed. But madness may be your only option. They left without deciding, needing time to grapple with the enormity of the choice. Fake her death, abandon her family, start a new life built on deception, or surrender to duty and lose everything that made life worth living. Elara sought Dame Marjorie's counsel. The old nurse listened to the plan, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. It could work, she said finally. But child, think carefully. You'll break your parents' hearts. Your mother, for all her rigidity, loves you in her way. Your father too. To let them believe you've died, to grieve for you while you live, that's a burden you'll carry forever. And the burden of marrying Marcellus? Of bearing his children while my heart belongs elsewhere? Which burden is heavier? Dame Marjorie had no answer. She pulled Elara into an embrace. Whatever you choose, know that I love you. I've loved you since you were a babe in my arms. I want you to have happiness, even if it means losing you. If I do this, Elara said, you'll be questioned. They'll ask if I seemed troubled, if I mentioned anything unusual. Let them question. I'm an old woman who's served faithfully for decades. They'll believe my tears and confusion. She held Elara at arm's length, studying her face as if memorizing it. But if you choose this path, you must commit completely. No messages home, no attempts to let them know you're alive. The dead don't send letters. I know, Elara whispered, and the weight of that knowledge nearly crushed her. Meanwhile, Kaelen wrestled with his own demons. To participate in this plan meant abandoning his family, his responsibilities, everything he'd been raised to value. His sister Lyra would be left to bear the full weight of their father's expectations. The Aureus legacy would fall to her shoulders, and she'd face it alone. But when he thought of Elara marrying Marcellus, of never seeing her again, of spending his life wondering what might have been, the choice became clearer. He met with Brother Theron again, alone this time. If we do this, if we succeed in escaping, what kind of life awaits us? An honest one, the friar replied. You'd have to leave Veritas, probably the entire region. Perhaps travel east, to the coastal cities where the silk trade extends but family names carry less weight. You're both skilled weavers, you could find work, build something together. We'd be no one. Just another couple trying to survive. Is that so terrible? To be no one in particular, freed from the crushing expectations of being someone. Kaelen thought about it. No more being the Aureus heir, carrying the weight of centuries of pride. No more navigating the treacherous politics of family rivalry. Just himself and Elara, creating a life on their own terms. When I'm with her, Kaelen said quietly, I'm already no one in particular. I'm just myself. And it's the most liberated I've ever felt. Then you have your answer. They made their decision in the temple, surrounded by the ghosts of forgotten gods who had witnessed countless human dramas. The harvest festival was 2 weeks away. They would act the night before the betrothal was to be announced. Are you certain? Kaelen asked one final time. Elara took his hands, her grip firm despite her fear. I'm certain of you. Of us. Of the fact that life without you isn't life at all. Everything else is uncertainty, but that truth I know absolutely. They spent the remaining days preparing. Brother Theron procured the draft and explained precisely when Elara should take it, late evening, after her parents had retired, when she could be discovered by servants in the morning. He would ensure he was nearby when the news spread, ready to offer prayers and comfort, subtly directing the family to place her in the crypt quickly, as was tradition for sudden deaths. Kaelen would wait in hiding near the Argent estate, watching for the funeral procession. Once Elara was interred, he'd wait until nightfall, then enter the crypt. 2 days after she took the draft, she would wake in his arms, and they would begin their journey east. Dame Marjorie prepared a bag for Elara, practical clothes, some jewelry that could be sold for travel money, letters of introduction to contacts in eastern cities. The old nurse worked with quiet efficiency, her eyes often bright with unshed tears. I'm proud of you, she told Elara the night before the plan would unfold. You're braver than I ever was. I spent my life serving others, never choosing my own path. You're choosing yours, despite the cost. That takes remarkable courage. It feels more like desperation than courage, Elara admitted. Sometimes they're the same thing. Elara spent her last evening at home memorizing details. The way afternoon light fell through the drawing room windows, her mother's laugh at dinner, her father's distracted affection as he kissed her forehead. She was saying goodbye to everything familiar, and the ache of it threatened to overwhelm her resolve. That night, alone in her chambers, she held the vial Brother Theron had provided. The liquid inside was dark and viscous, smelling faintly of herbs and something bitter. 2 days of death-like sleep. 2 days during which anything could go wrong. She thought of Kaelen waiting for her, their future together stretching ahead like an unmapped country. She thought of the alternative, Lord Marcellus's possessive touch, a life of hollow duty, love buried so deep it might never resurface. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. She drank the draught quickly, before fear could stop her. It tasted worse than it smelled, bitter and thick, coating her throat. She lay down on her bed, arranging herself as peacefully as possible, and waited. The effects came faster than she'd expected. Drowsiness crept through her limbs, heavy and irresistible. Her heartbeat slowed, each breath becoming more shallow. The room dimmed at the edges, shadows creeping inward. Her last conscious thought was of Kaelen's promise, "I'll be there when you wake. I swear it." Then darkness claimed her completely. The scream that woke the Argent household came from Elara's chambermaid. The girl had found her lady cold and still, not breathing, eyes closed in what appeared to be peaceful death. Within minutes, the household erupted into controlled chaos. Lord and Lady Argent rushed to their daughter's room, disbelief and grief warring on their faces. A physician was summoned, then another. Both confirmed what seemed obvious: the young woman was dead. Her heart had simply stopped, perhaps some defect no one had detected, perhaps a seizure during the night. Such things happened tragically, even to the young and healthy. Brother Theron arrived with the dawn, offering prayers and comfort. He gently suggested that the family might find peace in laying their daughter to rest quickly, as was the tradition. The Argent crypt was a place of honor, where Elara could rest among her ancestors. Through their grief, Lord and Lady Argent agreed. By midday, preparations were underway. By evening, a funeral procession wound through Veritas's streets to the family crypt on the hillside beyond the city walls. Kaelen watched from his hiding place in the woods, his heart shattering with each step of the procession. He knew Elara wasn't truly dead, but seeing her body carried on a bier, watching her parents' genuine grief, made the plan feel real in a way discussion hadn't. They were truly doing this. There would be no going back. The crypt doors closed with a finality that echoed across the hillside. Kaelen marked the location, planned his approach for when night fell. Now came the hardest part, waiting. Brother Theron, meanwhile, faced his own challenge. He needed to send word to Kaelen about the exact timing, 2 days from when Elara took the draft, which meant she would wake the morning after next. The message was crucial. If Kaelen arrived too early or too late, everything could unravel. He entrusted the message to a young novice, a boy he'd trained and trusted. The instructions were clear: deliver the sealed letter to Kaelen of House Aureus, mark it urgent, speak to no one of its contents. The novice set out immediately, his intentions honest, his dedication genuine. He had no way of knowing that the streets between the church and the Aureus estate would become a battlefield. A disagreement between Argent and Aureus servants had escalated. Insults led to shoving to drawn blades. By the time city guards arrived, 3 men were injured and the streets were in chaos. The guards cordoned off the area, allowing no one through while they sorted the mess. The novice, stopped at the cordon, pleaded his urgent errand. But the guards, hardened by dealing with Aureus Argent violence, refused to let him pass. It was standard procedure during feuding incidents: no one crossed between the territories until tempers cooled and leaders negotiated peace. "Please," the boy begged. "It's vital I deliver this message today." "Everything's vital to someone," the guard replied wearily. "You'll wait like everyone else." The novice waited an hour, then 2. When the cordon finally lifted and he reached the Aureus estate, he found the household in its own state of shock. Kaelen was missing. Gone without explanation, his bed unslept in, his riding horse taken from the stables. Lord Aureus was furious, convinced his son had run off with some unsuitable woman, humiliating the family name. The servant who took Brother Theron's message promised to deliver it when the young master returned. But of course, Kaelen wasn't returning. He was camped in the woods near the Argent crypt, counting hours until he could retrieve his love. Kaelen had never experienced time passing so slowly. He spent the day hidden in the woods, afraid to light a fire that might draw attention, eating cold rations, watching the crypt in the distance. That first night felt eternal. Every sound made him startle, certain someone had discovered their plan. By the second day, his anxiety had transformed into something darker. The delay stretched his nerves thin. He found himself imagining disasters. What if the draft didn't work as promised? What if 2 days wasn't precise enough and Elara woke early, alone in the darkness? What if someone discovered the deception? He clung to Brother Theron's assurances. The friar had used this draft before. It was reliable, safe, precise. Elara would wake exactly when expected, and Kaelen would be there. But Brother Theron's message, with its crucial confirmation of timing, never arrived. Kaelen didn't know it was sitting on a table in the Aureus manor, waiting for his return. He didn't know the novice had been delayed by street violence. He only knew that as the second night fell, he could finally approach the crypt. He waited until the city slept, until the moon rose high enough to provide light. Then he made his way down from the woods, approaching the hillside crypt with his heart hammering. He'd brought tools to break the lock, crude but effective. The crypt door resisted, then yielded. Inside, the darkness was absolute. Kaelen lit a candle he'd brought, and its wavering flame illuminated marble shelves holding the honored dead of House Argent. And there, on the lowest shelf as tradition dictated for the most recently deceased, lay Elara. She looked exactly as she had at the funeral, peaceful, beautiful, utterly still. Her hands were folded across her chest. Her hair had been arranged in waves across her shoulders. She wore a gown of silver silk, fitting for an Argent daughter. Kaelen approached slowly, his candle trembling. "Moonbeam," he whispered. "I'm here. I'm here as I promised." She didn't respond. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. Cold fear pierced Kaelen's chest. She should be waking soon, shouldn't she? The draft lasted 2 days. It had been 2 days. But she remained perfectly still, perfectly cold. He touched her hand, ice cold, as death would make flesh. He pressed his fingers to her wrist, searching for a pulse he couldn't find. He lowered his cheek to her lips, desperate for the whisper of breath. Nothing. "No," Kaelen breathed. "No, no, no. Elara, wake up. Please wake up. It's me. I'm here. We're supposed to leave together, remember? We have plans. We have a future." But the dead don't answer pleading. The dead don't respond to love. Kaelen's mind fractured. The draft must have failed. Or worse, what if it had never been sleep at all? What if Brother Theron had been mistaken, or the tincture had been corrupted, or Elara's body had reacted differently than expected? What if his moonbeam, his love, his reason for existing, had actually died? The thought crushed him, drove him to his knees beside the stone shelf. He gathered her cold body into his arms, pressed his face to her hair, and sobbed. All their plans, all their hopes, all the bright future they'd imagined gone. Extinguished like candle flame in wind. He couldn't bear it. Couldn't face a world without her light. The life stretching ahead looked gray and meaningless, an endless parade of empty days. He'd sacrificed everything, his family, his position, his future, for the chance to build a life with her. Without her, he had nothing. Without her, he was nothing. From his belt, Kaelen drew a small vial. He'd carried poison as a precaution, in case they were captured during their escape, in case torture loomed. He'd never imagined using it like this, but the decision came easily. Wherever Elara's spirit had gone, he would follow. If they couldn't share life, they would share death. "Wait for me, Moonbeam," he whispered, kissing her cold lips one final time. "I'm coming with you." He uncorked the vial and drank its contents in one swift motion. The poison worked quickly, his throat burned, his stomach cramped, his vision blurred. He lay down beside Elara on the stone shelf, taking her hand in his. Together, he breathed as darkness claimed him. Forever together. His chest stilled. His breath ceased. His heart, broken beyond mending, gave its final beat. The candle guttered and went out, leaving the crypt in absolute darkness. Elara surfaced from sleep like a diver breaching water after too long below. Her first sensation was cold, bone deep, marble cold. Her second was darkness, so complete it felt solid. Her third was confusion. Where was she? What had happened? Memory returned in fragments, the draft, the plan, falling into sleep. She'd succeeded, then. The sleeping death had worked. But this darkness, this cold, this stone beneath her. The crypt. She was in the Argent crypt. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by anticipation. Kaelen should be here, waiting for her to wake. They could finally leave, finally begin their new life together. Kaelen, she called softly, her voice rough from 2 days of disuse. Silence answered. She sat up carefully, disoriented in the darkness. Her hands explored the space around her, finding cold stone, the fabric of her funeral gown. But no Kaelen. No light. No sign that anyone had come for her. Panic began to creep in. Where was he? He'd promised to be here when she woke. Had something gone wrong? Had he been discovered, prevented from coming? Or worse, had he changed his mind, decided the cost was too high? No. She refused to believe that. Kaelen loved her. She knew that truth in her bones. If he wasn't here, something had prevented him, not choice. She needed to get out of the crypt, find light, orient herself. She stood carefully, arms outstretched, and began feeling her way through the darkness. Her fingers found other shelves, other bodies in various states of rest. The horror of her situation hit her. She was alone in a tomb, surrounded by the dead, and no one knew she was alive. Then her hand touched something unexpected. Not cold stone or ancient silk, but fabric that still held warmth. Wool. And beneath it, "Oh gods," Elara whispered. Her hands traced upward, finding a face, hair, features she knew as well as her own reflection. Kaelen. He was here after all. He'd come for her as promised. But he was cold, so cold and still, and when she pressed her ear to his chest, she heard no heartbeat. "No," she moaned. "No, Kaelen, no. Wake up. Please wake up." She shook him, called his name, wept over his body. But the dead don't wake, no matter how desperately the living plead. Her shaking hands found the empty vial near his body, still smelling faintly of bitter almonds. Understanding crashed through her like a tidal wave. He'd thought her dead. He'd found her cold and still and believed the draft had failed. So he'd followed her into death, couldn't bear to live without her. The irony was so cruel it stole her breath. They'd been minutes apart, no more. If she'd woken sooner, if he'd waited longer, if anything had been slightly different, but fate had woven its threads with merciless precision. Elara's grief transcended anything she'd imagined possible. The pain was enormous, crushing, a weight that pressed the air from her lungs. Her sunstride was gone. The man who'd brought warmth to her cold existence had been extinguished. The future they'd planned, the small house in an eastern city, the looms they'd buy, the tapestries they'd create together, the children they might have had, the long years of shared life, all of it vanished like smoke. She couldn't face it. Couldn't bear the thought of leaving this crypt alone, of building a life without him, of waking each morning to remember he was gone. She'd given up everything for their love, family, position, her very identity. She'd let her parents grieve and called it necessary sacrifice. She'd broken every bond except the one with Kaelen. And now that bond had been severed by cruel timing and crueler fate. She found his dagger in his belt. He'd always carried it, a wicked thing with an edge like a razor. In her mind, she heard his voice from their first meeting. The stars are honest. They don't pretend to be anything other than what they are. She wanted that honesty now. Wanted to stop pretending that life without him was possible or desirable. Her parents thought her dead already. Let that remain true. Let her actually join her beloved instead of wandering the world as a living ghost. "I'm coming, Sunstride," she whispered, pressing the dagger's point to her chest. "Wait for me just a moment more." The blade was sharp. The pain was brief. And then there was only darkness, and the hope that somewhere beyond this world, two souls might find each other again. Brother Theron discovered the tragedy the next morning. Worried that he'd heard nothing from either young person, he'd gone to the crypt to investigate. What he found there broke something fundamental in his spirit. Two young people, their lives ended by their own hands, lying together in death. Kaelen with the poison vial nearby. Elara with his dagger still clutched in her cold fingers. The evidence of what had happened was clear. and the friar's grief was matched only by his crushing guilt. He'd given Elara the draft. He'd devised the plan. He'd sent the message that never arrived in time. These deaths were, in no small measure, his responsibility. But even through grief, he recognized an opportunity. A terrible, costly opportunity, but perhaps the only chance to make their deaths mean something. He went first to House Argent, requesting urgent audience with Lord and Lady Argent. He told them their daughter had not died of natural causes, she'd taken her own life, unable to bear forced marriage to Lord Marcellus. And she had not died alone. Kaelen of House Aureus had been found with her, clearly having come to the crypt in response to a secret romance between the young people. Lord Argent's first response was fury, at the deception, at the betrayal, at an Aureus daring to touch his daughter. But his wife stopped him with a single question: did she love him? Brother Theron met her eyes. More than life itself, my lady. They loved each other truly, deeply, despite every barrier your families placed between them. They chose death over separation. That is how powerful their love was. Lady Argent's face crumpled. Whatever anger or pride she possessed couldn't withstand that knowledge. Her daughter had loved someone, genuinely loved them, and had been driven to death because that love was forbidden. Brother Theron delivered the same message to House Aureus. Lord Aureus's reaction was equally volatile, but faced with his dead son's body and the evidence of genuine love, even his hardened heart began to crack. Your feud killed them, Brother Theron said to both families separately, his voice thick with grief and accusation. Your hatred, your pride, your inability to see past ancient grievances, it drove two innocent young people to choose death over life in your world. Look at what your rivalry has cost you. Look at the price of your endless hatred. The two families had never gathered together peacefully. But death demanded what life had not, and the funeral was a shared affair. Two young people from rival houses, laid to rest side by side in neutral ground at the temple where they'd secretly met. All of Veritas turned out for the funeral. The tragedy had spread through the city like wildfire, the Argent daughter and the Aureus son, secret lovers driven to suicide by their family's feud. Some whispered it was romantic. Others called it wasteful. All agreed it was heartbreaking. Lord Argent and Lord Aureus stood on opposite sides of the graves, but for the first time in their lives, they looked at each other without hatred. Instead, they shared a grief so profound it transcended rivalry. Brother Theron delivered the eulogy, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. We are here to mourn not just two young lives, but the waste of those lives. Elara and Kaelen possessed everything our society values: youth, beauty, skill, intelligence. They could have contributed so much to Veritas, created so much beauty, brought so much joy. But we denied them that chance. Not through malice, but through stubborn adherence to hatred we inherited but never questioned. He turned to address the two lords directly. You taught your children to hate each other. But love paid no attention to your lessons. Love grew in secret, nurtured in stolen moments, stronger for being forbidden. And when your world offered them no path to be together, they chose to leave that world entirely. Their blood is on all our hands. Their deaths indict every one of us who chose feuding over fellowship. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to still. Finally, Lord Argent spoke, his voice aged a decade in a day. I did not know my daughter's heart. I thought I was protecting her, securing her future. Instead, I drove her to despair. I have lost everything that mattered, and I have only my pride to blame. Lord Aureus's response came after a long pause, his own voice breaking. My son tried to tell me the feud was pointless. I called him naive, disloyal. I taught him that Argent blood was poison. But he fell in love with an Argent daughter, and that love was pure enough to choose death rather than live without her. What does that say about my teachings? About everything I believed? The two men's eyes met across the graves, and in that moment, something shifted. The hatred that had burned between their families for generations guttered and died, extinguished by grief too enormous to share space with any other emotion. This ends, Lord Argent said, and his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. This feud, this rivalry, this poisonous legacy, it ends here. My daughter's death will not be meaningless. I will not allow another generation to inherit our hatred. Agreed, Lord Aureus said, and extended his hand across the graves. Lord Argent took it, and the two men who had been enemies since birth clasped hands over the bodies of their children. Around them, the gathered crowd gasped, then began to weep. Some wept for the tragedy of young love destroyed. Others wept with relief that perhaps, finally, Veritas might know peace. Dame Marjorie stood near the back of the gathering, her old face streaming with tears. She'd lost the girl she'd raised from infancy, lost her to a plan she'd helped enable. The guilt would haunt her remaining days. But watching the two lords shake hands, she allowed herself to hope that Elara's sacrifice had purchased something valuable, an end to the cycle of hatred. Years passed. The generation that had known the feud at its height gradually gave way to a generation that knew only peace. Children of Argent and Aureus played together, learned together, eventually married each other without scandal or consequence. The joint Argent-Aureus workshops became the finest in the known world. Their fabrics graced palaces and temples across continents. But more importantly, they employed weavers from both families and beyond, paying fair wages and fostering creativity over competition. Dame Marjorie lived to see Elara's younger cousin, who'd been just a child at the time of the tragedy, marry an Aureus nephew in a celebration that united the families in joy rather than grief. The old nurse died peacefully that winter, her last words a whispered prayer that Elara had found peace, wherever her spirit had gone. Brother Theron continued his ministry, but he carried the weight of his role in the tragedy until his own death. He'd given Elara the draft believing it would save her, never imagining it would lead to such catastrophic miscommunication. On his deathbed, he prayed for forgiveness, though he never forgave himself. Lord Argent and Lord Aureus lived to see their business alliance transform into genuine friendship. They grew old together, two men who'd spent their youth as enemies learning in their final years what they might have accomplished if they'd been friends from the start. When Lord Argent died, Lord Aureus wept genuine tears and delivered a eulogy praising his former rival as the brother he'd never known he needed. When Lord Aureus followed a year later, the entire city mourned, recognizing that the last living link to the old feud had been severed. The statue in the square became a pilgrimage site. Young lovers visited it, seeking blessings for their relationships. Parents brought children and told them the story of Elara and Kaelen, using the tragedy to teach that love matters more than pride, that people matter more than position. Artists painted scenes from their story. Poets composed verses about the moonbeam and sunstride who'd loved across impossible divides. Musicians wrote songs that echoed through the city's streets, keeping their memory alive. And every year, on the anniversary of their deaths, Veritas held a festival of remembrance. Both families came together to place flowers at the statue, to tell the story again, to renew their commitment to the peace that had been purchased so dearly. Weakens unity creates strength beyond measure.